All right, so good morning and thank you for participating in today's workshop. My name is Liz Hart and I'm the founder and executive director of Tailored for Success. Tailored for Success is a nonprofit organization that provides job seekers with the resources, skills training, and supportive reinforcement they need to succeed in today's new workforce. We work with people who are unemployed, underemployed, or in transition. Today's webinar is part of our monthly webinar series, Reimagine Your Career. And the goal of the workshops is to present up-to-date information to job seekers on a personal, professional, and career development issues. This webinar is being recorded and a replay will be sent in a few days after the webinar ends, and will also be posted on our YouTube channel where you can find recordings of past webinars in this series. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I will monitor them during the presentation. Any question that is not answered, I will address at the end of the presentation. Also, please feel free to contact me directly with any questions that you have regarding career development or transitioning back into this new normal of the workplace. And either myself or a volunteer would be really happy to help you. Okay, so let's get into today's topic. When it comes to virtual interviewing, 75% of, hold on one second, for some reason I'm frozen, there we go. When it comes to interviewing, preparation is key. 75% of executives talk about using real-time video to interview candidates. So you need to be prepared. And I think the benefit of a virtual interview is that it eliminates the need for travel for both the interviewer and the interviewee. There's so much less time when you think about it. If you have an interview scheduled, the time that you take to travel to the interview, while you're into the interview, it may take 45 minutes to an hour, and then you have to travel back home. You know, that's a good chunk of your day. But with virtual interviewing, all of that is gone, and it makes it much, much easier to interview and also to have more than one interview in a day. So preparation is definitely key. You want to make sure that you're still doing what you should do, which is researching the company beyond the website. Most job seekers go to the website, the company website, for information on the company where they're going to interview, and that's fine. But there is just so much more. You can do a Google search and find out what's going on in the company. Perhaps you can find out who the company's competitors are. So say if you're interviewing at Amazon, you can put in Amazon and competitors in Google and come up with a list of competitors. There may be some big litigation that they're involved in. They may be thinking to take over another company. That's all relevant information that you can use during your interview to show that you prepared. You can also research the position. So you want to find out where does it fit within the overall company, the team, etc. This will also help you when you have to ask questions during the interview, which we'll talk about in just a little while. So the first thing that you really need to do when you're preparing for a virtual interview is to check your technology. You want to check to make sure your systems are working. A friend of mine recently talked about downloading every platform that you can think of: Zoom, GoToMeeting, Skype, Teams, Google Hangout, because you want to have them all set and all ready, because you just don't know what the company is going to use for their interview, and you want to be prepared and you want to be able to be familiar with it before the interview. You need to make sure that your audio system is working, and important to make sure that it's not only working audio, but your microphone is working. You also want to make sure that the camera is working. If you have a very grainy picture with your Zoom, you may need a webcam, and that's not something you can get 5 minutes before the interview. So checking all of this out beforehand is really important. And most employers, when they're looking to hire, they say that technical savvy is one of the top 10 traits that they're looking for. So if you're seen fumbling with your computer, it doesn't leave a really good impression with the person that you're interviewing with. So again, that preparation is really key. And you also want to make sure that your camera is not too close and that you're at eye level with the person that you're speaking to. You also want to make sure that your head and upper body is visible and that you're entirely framed within the picture. So all little tricks just to make you have a better impression on that person that you're interviewing with. Okay, and as with all technology, it's important to have a backup plan because Murphy's Law is always in effect when it comes to technology. Make sure that you have the phone number and email of the person that you're interviewing with so that if something should happen, you can reach out to them right away. Or you may have to make sure that your phone is charged because if something happens to your computer, then you can just connect with them with your cell phone. So always have a backup plan. You know, it's better to be safe than to be sorry in these situations. I mean, we're all nervous when we're interviewing, so just take that one worry out of your mind. The other thing that I want to mention is to make sure that your background is free from distractions. Not everyone has a green screen and a screensaver, and that's fine. But make sure that if you don't have those things, you're sitting in front of a blank wall and that you have really good lighting, okay? Make sure you turn off your phone and eliminate as many distractions as possible. When you're thinking about your background in a virtual interview, you want to be the focal point of conversation. You don't want anything else distracting the interviewer from you. You don't want, a cat running across your keyboard or small children coming up and asking you a question. A good trick is to use a do not disturb sign if you can, just to make sure that people know that you're on an interview. And if you're living with other people, just make sure that they know that you have an interview scheduled at a certain time and that you may not be available. Also, the third tip is to get properly dressed. A lot of people forget this. My husband works for this Commonwealth and he's in human resources. And I always hear him saying that people that he interviews virtually will come in things that they would wear if they were going shopping. They don't pay attention to being professionally dressed. Even though it's a virtual interview and you're not actually meeting the person in person, it's very important to dress as if you were in an in-person interview. So for women, that means a really nice blouse, pants, or dress. For men, a button-up shirt, chinos. You don't necessarily have to wear a tie. That may be a little bit too formal, but it also depends on the position that you're interviewing for. And also, it's important to dress from head to toe. So shoes are important also. Even though they're not going to see them, there's something psychological about having on dress shoes that makes you feel more professional and that you're taking this really seriously. So think about what you're going to wear to the interview and plan it out ahead of time so that you're not rushing around at the last minute trying to figure out what you're going to wear. You want to really pay attention to your body language. You want to look directly into the camera. You want to sit up straight. And if all else fails, smile, right? People like to hire people that they like, that they think are friendly. And so it's really hard to convey that virtually unless you're smiling, okay? So really take consideration as to looking directly at that little green dot. And I know it seems a little weird, so you may have to practice a little bit, but looking directly at that, because then that means that you're looking directly at the person, okay? Eye contact is very important when you're interviewing. And again, watch your body language, make sure you're not slumping, sit towards the end of the chair so that you're sitting up straight, your back is straight, and you look like you are paying attention to every word. The next tip, number 5, is a little different than you may have heard. You need to take your time when you're answering questions. A lot of people, when they're interviewing, they rush through their answers. And so they're not really thinking about the question. Having pauses in an interview is perfectly fine. In fact, it's suggested and recommended. And most people who are interviewing you will expect it. So you want to pace your answers. You want to think about what the person said. And if at any point in time you feel like you need to reframe or you didn't understand a question, it's fine to ask, say, this is what I think you're asking me. Is this correct? So that what you're doing is you're developing dialogue with the person. You're not trying to get through this as fast as you can, even if you're a little uncomfortable about being interviewed on Zoom. You want to make the best impression possible and have a thoughtful, well thought out answer. So you want to think about typical questions that the interviewer may ask you, like, why are you interested in this role? Why did you apply in the first place? What do you know about our company? And again, you want to go past what's on the website. You want to dig a little bit deeper and find a little bit more about the company. You can go to sites like Glassdoor. They have company information, monster.com, things like that to get more information. You can also ask questions like, they may ask you a question like, tell me about a challenge that you had at work and how you dealt with it. Common interview questions. What are you looking for in a new position? You can find out a lot of answers to these questions by doing some reflection before the interview, finding out about the company. You may have to do LinkedIn research or see if they have a Facebook or Instagram page, things like that. A little bit extra goes a long way when you're interviewing. Also, you need to be prepared for when the interviewer asks that question, which they always do. Do you have any questions for me? Right? That's something that they are always asking. So you want to think these things out beforehand. You may want to ask what a typical day looks like in the role. You may want to really get details on whether this is a in-person position, a remote position, a hybrid position, and what does that actually look like? What would my week, what would my day look like? And how would you describe your ideal candidate is a great question to ask. And with that question, that's where you can start a conversation of, okay, if this is what your ideal candidate looks like, how do I stack up against that ideal candidate? Is there anything that I can explain to you that would make me a better candidate for this position than you might have originally thought? Another really good question is to ask the person that's interviewing you, could you walk me through the next steps in the hiring process so that you know what the next steps are? Maybe you have to wait a week, a few weeks, or a month. Maybe that person who is interviewing you is not the decision maker, and maybe the decision maker is on vacation. And so if that is the case, the wait time may be quite lengthy, and you don't want to be nervous and think that you didn't do good on the interview. It may just simply be that they're waiting for someone to get back from vacation. But if you don't ask that question, then you don't know. It's also really important. The sixth tip that I want to give you is to have these things handy, like a notepad or a glass of water. And again, the questions that you're going to ask the interviewer. It's also really good and important to have a copy of your resume handy, a copy of the job description. You don't want to have to memorize your resume, and the interviewer may ask you a question on your resume that you hadn't really thought of in a while. And if you have your resume right there, you can refer to it. Now, a virtual interview is also really great because typically I would say not to bring anything other than a notebook and a pen to an interview, not to bring a bottle of water or coffee or anything like that, because you never know when you're going to spill something, or you don't have any place to set the bottle of water. So it's really, really tricky to bring extra things to an interview. But in a virtual interview, you can have all of those things around you, and you can feel quite comfortable taking a sip of water, writing down notes. It's also a really good clue to your interviewer that you're really interested in the position, and that you're making sure that that you're taking notes and you're understanding everything, and you're taking things really, really seriously. And again, with those questions, rather than memorizing the things that you want to ask, just have them written down, just some general questions, so that if they don't go over things in the interview, and typically they ask you this at the end of an interview, but you never know, it could be the start of an interview. Before we begin, is there anything that I can answer for you about this position or about the company? It's sort of a way of turning the tables, and just to see how fast you can think on your feet. So it's always handy to have these things around you. The next tip is just to be yourself. I know that interviewing is very difficult. It's very stressful. And I always say that the one thing that you want to remember in an interview is that you want to walk away with a job offer. Okay. And then you can determine whether or not this is a job that you want to take. But you have to be yourself, because if you're acting like what you think they want, you're going to have to act like that every day on the job. And that's just not natural. And that's not something that you can sustain. So you have to be yourself. And you also have to think about the fact that this is a two-way street here, right? So they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. Does this look like a place, or feel like a place that you would like to be for, 7-8 hours a day? You might want to ask about the culture to see if the culture is something that's going to be compatible with what you like. And so if you're not yourself, you're not going to make a good decision as to whether or not to take this job. You want to get past any reservations that you have about maybe salary or location or anything like that, and just relax and just have a conversation with the person. That's really the best way. I mean, an interview is nothing more than a two-way conversation between two people that ultimately want the same thing. The interviewer wants to hire someone, and you want to get a new job. So you need to make sure that it's a good match. There's an analogy that I like to use, that interviewing is like dating, right? Everybody's nervous, and you want to make sure that you make a good first impression. And so if you think about it like that, maybe that's a way for you to be a little bit more relaxed. The 8th tip is to make a connection. You can make a connection with everyone, and you don't always have a really good rapport with everyone that you meet. But it is really important when you're interviewing to make a connection with the person that's interviewing you. And that's because you want that person to turn out to be your champion, right, within the company, especially if you don't know anyone within that company. That person that's interviewing you, if they really like you, and if they get a really good sense of you, and a sense that you can do the job, that you'd fit into the culture, and that it's a perfect fit, they will champion you outside of the interview with the person that's making the hiring decision. So you want to find something to talk about that maybe you're both interested in. So for instance, if the person that you're interviewing with, in the background, you see a picture, say, of a sailboat, and you're interested in sailing also, you could start a conversation about that. People like, again, to hire people that they like, and people that are like them. So if you find something common to talk about, then you're building that relationship, and that person will probably remember you and be a champion to you after the interview is over. Now, the next tip is something that you would think I wouldn't have to remind people about, but you'd also be surprised at how many times people will not send a thank you after an interview. So Now it's so much easier than it was before, where you had to do a handwritten note. No one's really expecting that anymore, but just a quick email within 24 hours after the interview. Send an email thanking the person, or if you're interviewed by multiple people, send them a thank you email, each individually, thanking them for their time. People really appreciate that. And studies show that candidates that send a thank you email or a thank you note after an interview rank higher in terms of whether or not they will get the job, because it just shows consideration for the person taking the time to interview you. It shows that you are paying attention. Usually in an email to someone, or a handwritten note, I suggest putting in something that stood out to you in the interview. So don't just send an email that says, dear Mr. Mahoney, thank you so much for your time in interviewing me. I really am interested in this position and hope to hear back from you soon. You could say something, I enjoyed our conversation, and I think it's very coincidental that we're both interested in sailing, and I'd like to be able to talk to you more about this. I hope to hear from you soon. Or if they talked about something about the company culture or what a typical day is like, and it really stood out to you, just mention it, because then that shows that you really paid attention and that you were invested in the company, and that you would probably make a really good hire. The other thing to remember is my 10 tip that is very it's like the cherry on top of the cake, so to speak, is just to stay positive. I know that being in job search is extremely difficult. It's nerve-wracking. It's discouraging at times when you're not hearing back from employers, where you go on multiple interviews and talk to multiple people and you're not getting an offer. I feel that for every job seeker, there is that perfect position out there, and that you just have to work hard and make it happen. You have to do that research that I talked about in the beginning, and you have to keep a positive attitude, because if you're weighed down by the job search and how hard it is and how long it's taking and everything else that goes along with it, that's going to come through when you're interviewing. And you don't want that to show to your interviewer, because maybe that one interviewer is interviewing for that position that's going to be your ultimate position that you really, really want, that you really want them to give you an offer. One last thing that I will say as a bonus tip is you never talk about salary in the first interview. You leave that for the second interview or maybe later, and you try to avoid that conversation at all costs. Most positions should have a job range listed in the job description, and you really don't want to talk about that. If the interviewer brings it up, then that's fine. You can talk about it and maybe deflect it a little bit, but you don't want to use that as part of the questions that you ask an interviewer. What does this job pay? When will I get vacation? Things like that. You want to focus on the job. So no matter whether the interview is in person or virtual, you do have to prepare. You cannot just wing an interview, even if it's virtual, because when it comes to interviewing, Murphy's Law is always in effect. Something is always going to go wrong. So the more you prepare, the better you'll do, and the better it will boost your confidence in tackling really tough and difficult interviews, where maybe they put you through a case scenario that you have to then talk about, or whatever. So just prepare, be as positive as you can, and I have faith that you will find the perfect position for you. So that's the end of the presentation. Are there any questions? I'm going to look in the chat. I don't see anything. Or you can unmute and ask a question if you'd like. My 2022 goal is to keep all of my webinars under an hour, because I think we all have Zoom fatigue, and sitting on Zoom for an hour is just starting to be torturous. So I try to keep everything as short and to the point as possible with some really clear tips that you can use. And if there's any follow-up that's necessary, if you have any questions after the fact, like I said, please feel free to reach out to me. Here is my contact information, the website for Tailored for Success, where you can sign up for our newsletter, become part of our community so that you find out when workshops are happening. Our next workshop is going to be on LinkedIn. I've entitled it LinkedIn 101, but it will also have some really good tips that have just come out as to how to make your profile stand out a little bit more. So it's for the novice and also for the person who has had a profile for a while. I think there's going to be something that you can learn. Please feel free to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We have groups on Facebook and LinkedIn, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you're notified when a new video is up. I have a whole series coming up on dressing for interviews, dressing for work, and how to understand what your body type is and how to accentuate that, and how to shop on a budget and use thrift stores and online thrift stores and things like that. So I hope that this webinar has been helpful to you. And I do wish you the best of luck in your job search. Have a great day. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
Oh, no, I just wanted to thank you. That was a lovely presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And good luck. I hope to join us again.
Yes, ma'am. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.